What's up, guys? Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com, back with another SketchUp extension tutorial for you. So in today's video, we're going to use the extension FredoScale in order to create a bent park bench inside of SketchUp. Before we get started, I want to thank my newest supporters on Patreon. So big thank you to Me Architect, Nikki Santos, Anthony Rojas, Ken Nguyen, Lucas Borges, and Raul Duana. Patreon, as most of you know, is the website where you can support creators that you like on YouTube. One of the perks of being a supporter on Patreon is you get to vote on the extension that I cover every week. So if that's something you're interested in, you want to support the show, make sure you check out that link in the notes down below. This week, my patrons voted, and they selected a new FredoScale tutorial for this week's video. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. All right, so FredoScale, as a lot of you know, is Fredo 6's suite of tools designed to help you scale different objects and give you more scaling tools inside of SketchUp. One of my favorite tools contained in this tool set is the Radial Bend tool. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you one way that you could come through and you could create kind of a park bench shape inside of SketchUp using this tool. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, go ahead and create some slats. And so my slats, I'm going to make them a component. So when I change one of them, the others will change as well. And I'm just going to take these and I'm just going to make a copy. And I'm going to use the move tool in copy mode in order to do this. And I'll just create this copy right here. And I'm going to type in something like times 30 or something like that. So that's going to give me a number of different copies of this. And then I'm going to come in here, and this got a little bit long, so I'm going to select the end on this and bring it down a little bit. And so what we're going to do for this tool, and I'm going to erase out my default model, what we're going to do for this tutorial, is we're going to come in here and we're going to bend these shapes. So you can see how, because they were components, when I make a copy of one of them, or when I make a change to one of them, the change occurs on the others as well. And we may try a different design on this at some point, but for right now what I want to do is I just want to take this and I just want to bend it. And so if you think about the way that like a park bench sits, it's going to be a piece of metal that's going to be bent on the end, and then it's also going to be bent here in order to make the back. So let's start by selecting this whole thing and using Radial Bend in order to bend this. And you've seen what we've done before, where we've taken Radial Bend and we've bent like a whole object like this, so bending the whole thing. Well, what I want to do here is, instead of bending the whole thing, I want to bend this starting at maybe like this point right here, and I want to bend this this section in between here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these and I'm going to click on Radial Bend, and I'm going to find where I want my bend to start, and I'm going to go ahead and click. And then it's going to ask me to draw a reference direction, so I'm just going to click on this point once, and then it's going to ask for a target point, so I'm going to click on this point again. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to move our mouse over here, and you can see how this is going to be about negative 180 degrees. So I'm going to type in negative 180 and hit the enter key. And sometimes what this does is this bends this the wrong direction. We could do a couple different things on this. I could use the scale tool in order to flip this in place, or we could just come over to the other side of this and do the same thing just from the other side. That usually seems to fix that as well. So I don't really know how to make sure that that's going to lock to the right direction, but now if I type in 180 degrees on this side, it should bend it properly. So what we were able to do is we were able to come in here and we were able to bend this so that we've got this kind of overhanging steel piece right here. Well, now what we need to do is we need to come in here and we need to bend up our back of our chair. And so we can assume that that's probably going to run from here maybe to, we'll say maybe our seat would be right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use Radial Bend again, and I'm just going to take this and I'm going to select my point right here, and I'm going to bend this up. And so you can see how when I do that, that doesn't give me what I want, because it bends this whole piece along here, and you don't want this whole piece bent. So what you want to do instead is you want to come in here at this point and you just want to bend this to about whatever the point is going to be, whatever the radius of your bend is going to be. So for this one, maybe we would click right here and then click it as a target point, and then we would bend it up kind of like this. So now I could bend this up maybe like 75 degrees or something like that. So I'm going to type in negative 75 and hit the enter key, and that's going to bend this up. So now what I have is I have my chair along here and it's bent up along this face. And so one thing we could do now if we wanted to, and a lot of this is going to depend on what our chair is going to look like, but let's come in here and let's say that we wanted to also create a leg. So we're going to give this the same thickness, which is going to be a 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to draw another metal piece by just drawing a face and then extruding this out. And don't worry about the direction it's going for right now. We can cut all that off in a minute. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this kind of a long metal piece, and I'm just going to select it, and we're going to make this a component, and we'll call it something like a chair arm, and hit the enter key. And so now what we have is we have this chair arm in here, and probably the first thing you might want to think about doing is you might want to go ahead and rotate this so it's facing kind of the direction that you want it to go. So maybe something like, we'll say something like this for right now. And so what we want to do is we want to take this and we now want to bend this so that it's facing downward at kind of an angle. So we're just going to do the same thing, where we're going to select Radial Bend, and we'll select a point right here, and then we'll just bend this down, let's say -80 degrees. We'll go ahead and we'll leave that with a little bit of an angle to it. And you can see how when we do this, what this did is this this curve or this bend is a little too far forward. Well, the nice thing about the way we're doing this and the way that the sticky geometry in SketchUp works is you can actually select all of this geometry. So you can select the geometry that's making up this end and the geometry that's making up the leg, and we can just use the move tool in order to move this across. And if you remember, because this is that sticky geometry, we can do that. And one thing that you might want to think about doing is you might want to think about clicking outside of this group and just drawing a line along this edge. That'll give you something to inference to when we do this. So we'll go ahead and select this whole thing. And we'll just go find that line that we drew outside of this group. And so this is kind of jumping around on me a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to adjust the axis inside of this group so that it'll kind of inference the way that I want. So I'm just going to come into the axis tool, and I'm just going to place this axis along this line. So I'm basically changing the component axis so that it's now along this line. Well, now if I try to move this, this is already along that red axis, so it's really easy to make that move. So now we can kind of look at this on the bottom and kind of line this up where we want it to be. So, and I will link to a video about using the axis to make things like this a little bit easier in the notes down below. But obviously what we have here is we have a leg that's way too long. So we're just going to do the same thing, where I'm just going to take this and I'm probably just going to push-pull it actually. And we'll just push-pull this to make this shorter. And so this is one thing that you should kind of get used to doing, is if you can set your models up in this way where you can kind of adjust this raw geometry, it really makes things a lot easier when you're trying to make adjustments later. Like same thing here, if I wanted to maybe make this a little shorter, I could just adjust my axis so that it's along this edge, and then I can just move this along that axis right there, up and down, in order to make this shape kind of what I want it to be. So you can see how by doing this, making these changes gets really easy and really quick. And so now that we've kind of made this adjustment inside of this group, what we're going to do is we're going to move this outside just a little bit so that it's actually outside of our chair. And so what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to come in here and I'm just going to draw another 1/2 inch metal piece and then push-pull it down so that it's got kind of the same bottom point as this arm right here. And obviously there's some things you could do to build out like a frame or something like that, but I'm more demonstrating kind of the way that you could use this tool in order to create something like this quickly. And so what I would do is I would just use the move tool in copy mode in order to copy this across. And then on this top piece we could do a few different things. We could create like a pipe along here, or we could also just take the radial bend tool and just kind of bend it back So kind of the same way that we did before, we could bend this back maybe 180 degrees or maybe 175 degrees or something like that. Maybe something where it's kind of like straight up and down. So we could bend this chair back kind of like this. So you can see how when we use Radial Bend along with the sticky geometry inside of SketchUp, creating shapes like this gets really easy. So leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought about this workflow, if you thought it was helpful, if you have any more tips for working with these tools. I just love having that conversation with you guys. If you liked this video, please remember to click that like button down below. If you're new around here, remember to click that subscribe button for new SketchUp content every week. If you like what I'm doing in this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Every little bit helps, even if it's only $1 a month. So make sure you check out that link in the notes down below. But in any case, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.